Hi, this is week 4. So welcome to week 4. This is the first grounded assessment week we're going to have. This week we're going to spend most of our time discussing the fractal, identifying the fractal, and showing how the fractal works in the market. The fractal is always our first initiating trade, and it's a breakout trade. So on any breakout trade, you're always buying the top or selling the bottom. So you have the world's worst trade location because you are selling the bottom and buying the top, and you also have the most potential loss. So this week we're going to find out how to locate the fractal and then how to decide which fractals to take and which not to take, and Professor Alligator is going to help us with that. So let's go over to the screen now and let's look at some of our goals for today. What we want to do today on our first day in week 4 is we want to review some of the essential concepts that we've discussed in earlier weeks. We want to know when to stay out of the market. This is a review also. We want to know the definition of a fractal, how it looks on paper. We want to understand how the alligator takes into account the current leverage of the market. 5, we want to understand the behavior of the market, and we want to know where to put our entry points on the fractal. So first, let's review some of the most essential concepts. Remember that chaos really means freedom, because you have the freedom that you don't have to massage and distort the incoming information to fit your old categories. And remember also that every time you hear the word chaos or think it or see it, we're going to substitute what it really means, which is new information. And remember that the most important question we can ask is, how do we handle new incoming information? You've seen this slide before. You're going to see it again because it's very, very important. Remember also that we spent a considerable amount of time talking about the choices that we have to use new incoming information. We basically have only 2. The one we're taught all the way through school, and the one that's most naturally and habitual with most of it, is to massage it, distort it to fit into old categories. There's a psychological axiom that says anytime you feel overwhelmed or bored, you're trying to fit new information into old categories. Throughout this study program, there's probably going to be times that you're going to feel overwhelmed, and there's also going to be times that you may be bored. But just remember that anytime you feel overwhelmed and or bored, it's because you're trying to fit new information into old categories. That's our most common way of dealing with new information. A better way is to let the new information organize itself, and that means letting go of your categories, and it also means creating some risk. I'm going to show you another slide now that you've seen to illustrate this, processing new information. And remember the illustration we used about the hydrogen atom, and it's moving around, trillions of them in this room, and there's also another atom there, the oxygen atom. And remember that we said when they come into each other's gravitational field, that creates new information. Then it becomes the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms' intelligence. And even though this is the simplest organization I can possibly think of, they make what seems to be an intelligent decision. Most of the time, that decision is not to let the new information reorganize them, but to remain a hydrogen and an oxygen atom. Every now and then, they will allow that new information to organize itself, and what comes out is a transcending experience that turns into water. So remember that the most important question we can ask is, what do we do with new information? We either fit it into old categories or we let it organize itself. One of the most important things we can also understand is how the market changes. In time, how does it change? The first thing that happens when the market changes, or before the market changes, is that there's a movement in the composite mass attitude of traders. We either get more bullish or more bearish. When that happens, we enter the market, and that produces a change in volume. When the volume changes, then that in turn produces a change in the speed of the momentum. It will either accelerate or decelerate, and that produces a change either in the speed or the direction of the momentum. And remember our illustration of the bowling ball last week. And then finally, that produces a change in price. So what we want to do is we want to get up this scale so that we trade in front of the change in price. So let's summarize what we've covered so far in this study program. We know about the current situation in trading, that most people lose. Very few people win consistently, and we want to join that small minority. We also know what the market really does. And remember that it always immediately finds that exact price where there is an equal disagreement on value and an agreement on price. We also looked at what chaos is. And remember always that chaos is simply new information which gives you a choice of how to handle that new information. Last week we talked about the 4 attractors: the point attractor, the circle cycle attractor, the torus attractor, and then the attractor that really controls the market and yours and mine's behavior, which they call the strange attractor. We also looked at how the market changes, what changes first and what changes last, and again, to repeat again and again, the most important question you can ever ask is, what do you do with new information? Okay, let's go forward then, and let's use Mr. Alligator, Professor Alligator, and let's go to the fractal. Remember, this is the first of the grounded assessments. This is the first of our 5 dimensions. It's very important that we get this correct because this is our first entry. As a matter of fact, we're going to spend not only today, but we're going to spend tomorrow reviewing what we did today. So let's look at the fractal first of all. Remember, we had a typical trading market. And remember, from a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the typical trading market simply goes back and forth in a bracket, a range-bound market, about 80% of its life, anywhere from 70 to 85% of the time, it's in this bracketed market. We want to stay out of that bracketed market, but we don't want to lose any of these blind chicken trades, these trend trades, because that's where our money is made. But that only happens about 15 to 30% of the time. So if you're busy trading in this market here, you're going to give back most of your profits. And here, if you can stay out of the bracketed markets, your profits are going to accumulate. The most important aspect of the fractal, our first dimension, is we do not want to lose out on this trend trade. We want to be in every trend. And the fractal itself guarantees that we will not be left out of any significant trend move. And that's a big guarantee. Okay, let's go right then to the fractal formation itself. I trust that you have seen this in your study manual and in the book. The fractal formation is quite simple. Actually, if you hold your hand up in front of your face and hold your fingers up, the 5 fingers, it will look something like this. Here's the technical definition of a fractal. It's a series of a minimum of 5 consecutive bars where one of the bars high is higher than the 2 previous highs and higher than the 2 following highs. Now, the exact opposite is true for self-fractal. This is a bifractal, and it has to have at least 5 bars, consecutive bars, where one of the bars has a higher high than the 2 previous or the 2 following. The 2 previous and the 2 following bars do not have to make a tent shape like this. This is sort of a pristine fractal. Let's look at B, the illustration in B. Here we have a bifractal because it fulfills the definition. You have a high that's higher than the 2 previous highs, and notice that the immediate previous high does not have to be higher than the high 2 bars back, and it is followed by 2 lower highs. So that fulfills the definition, the technical definition of a fractal up. And a fractal is basically the market has come up to this point and it's changed its mind and it decided to come back down. Then it makes another decision, and if it goes above this point, and we usually allow 1 tick above this point, we will enter that market on the long side. Now notice an interesting thing here in this pattern on B. That is that we also have a self-fractal. The exact same bar is the center bar for a bifractal and a self-fractal. Remember the definition. A self-fractal has to have a low that's preceded by 2 higher lows and followed by 2 higher lows. A fractal itself can share fingers. For example, let's look at illustration C. Here we have 6 bars, and we have the first 5 bars which fulfill the requirements for an up fractal. We have 5 consecutive bars where the high is higher than the 2 previous and the 2 following bars. We also have a low bar here, and the 2 previous bars have higher lows, and the 2 following bars have higher lows. So we have an up fractal and we have a down fractal. And over here in D, this is, excuse me, this is sometimes confusing. We have a high that's preceded by two lower highs. We have one lower high following it, but the second high has the same high as the fractal. So that is not a fractal up, but then we have a lower high. So anytime you have a bar whose high on an up fractal is exactly the same as the middle finger or the indicator bar here, it simply doesn't count. Remember that the definition is a minimum of 5 bars. Here we have 6 bars, and basically that one doesn't count. It still fulfills the requirement. We have a high that's preceded by 2 lower highs and followed by 2 lower highs. So look at that illustration very carefully, and then we're going to go through a fractal pattern 1 bar at a time to see how it forms. And here we are with the fractal pattern which creates a fractal signal. So let's go 1 bar at a time. This illustrates an up fractal, and the caret down illustrates a down fractal. Here's our first bar. Here's our second bar. Now, that's 2 bars, but we don't have a fractal now. We have a third bar. This may be a fractal, but it needs 2 lower highs on the right side of this high to be a lower fractal. So let's put in another bar. Well, that's a third bar. We don't have a fractal yet. Now we have the potential of having a fractal because we have a high followed by a lower high and is preceded by a minimum of 2 lower highs here. If the next bar is lower than this number 4 bar, we will indeed have a fractal pattern. And we're putting this up, making it happen, but we do have a fractal pattern here. We have a fractal bisignal because we have on bar number 3 a high that's preceded by 2 lower highs followed by 2 lower highs. Let's assume that the market proceeds on down and we have another bracket, another bar that comes down, another bar that comes down, and a third bar comes down. Now we have a fractal sell signal. So we have the exact opposite of the buy signal. The buy signal fulfills all the requirements, and the sell signal fulfills all the requirements. We term this a bracketed market, and this is how we build a spider web. And remember, we talked about the spider web before. The spider web, we put a buy stop above the market, a sell stop below the market, and whichever one the market takes out, we're in the market in that direction. We have to put this in perspective with the alligator, but right now we're just looking at this schematic. So make sure that you understand that the market came up to this point, changed its mind, came down to this point, changed its mind, and we're somewhere in this area. So we would have a bracketed market, and we don't care which way the market goes. One of our indicators, one of our constant indicators that we've mentioned before, is whenever you look at the market, whenever you look at a chart, you should ask yourself the question, do I care which way it goes? And ideally you won't, because you'll be situated to take advantage of the trend no matter which way it goes. Let's look now at a variety of fractal patterns, and here's a whole variety of a mixture of them. Here's our pristine fractal here. Here's another fractal. Remember, this takes 6 bars because these 2 bars have the same high. In this illustration, we have 3 bars that have the same high, so this requires 7 bars to create the fractal. Here we have a fractal here and a fractal there, and either one of these could be considered the fractal because both of them have 2 previous lower highs and 2 following lower highs. Here is a fractal here. This is the first one because we have a high preceded by 2 lower highs, followed by 1 lower high, an even bar, followed by a lower high. So on this bar, when this bar is completed, that becomes a valid fractal. Now on the bottom part, you have just the opposite. So we want to look at that and study that, make sure that we can understand and locate a fractal very quickly. Let's look now at some fractal facts. And some of the fractal facts that we want to look at is, and this is interesting because what happens between any up fractal and a down fractal is always an Elliott wave of 1 degree or another. A lot of traders talk about the Elliott wave. Most of them don't like the Elliott wave because they say it's too subjective. It depends upon the person who's interpreting it. With the fractals, you can actually trade inside the Elliott wave without ever knowing what wave you're in. So That's a godsend for a lot of traders who are confused by the Elliott wave. When we get through with this program, you will not be confused by the Elliott wave. Let's look at another fractal fact. A fractal is always a change in behavior. It's displayed as a 5-bar sequence where the center bar, or group of center bars, has higher highs for the up fractals or lower lows for the down fractal. And one way to trade the fractal is that whenever the market exceeds the outside extreme, the high or on the up fractals and the low on the down fractals, is to simply go with that and go place a fractal buy, and that puts you in the market in the direction that the market's going to move. So what we've done today is we've looked preliminarily at the fractal, and tomorrow we're going to repeat some of the same things, and later in the week we're going to use practice charts, and we're going to see how the fractal works in some actual charts. Remember to do your 2 times of the AT and also your morning pages. Very, very important. And we'll be back with you tomorrow for more on the fractal. Here we are at day 2, week 4, and today we're going to spend a lot of time reviewing exactly what we did yesterday. And remember that if you feel bored, it's because you're trying to fit new information into old categories. So let's don't do that. I'm sure that you did your morning pages and you're doing your twice-a-day AT. And the reason that this fractal is so important and the reason that we're going over it twice is because this is your initiating trade. This is your first entry into a trading campaign for profit. It's extremely important that you take the appropriate fractals. We certainly don't take every fractal that's on there. And another thing that we want to emphasize at this point is that this is a complete way of trading. So you can forget about everything else. Don't worry about RSI, don't worry about the stochastics or the Gann or the astrology, any of that you don't really need. All you need are the 5 grounded assessments and a way to put them together. So today we're going to review the alligator. Later this week, tomorrow, we're going to look at the alligator on some actual charts. Then the next day, we're going to integrate both the alligator and the fractal. So let's go now to day 2, week 4, and review and make sure that we know precisely everything we need to know about the fractal. To repeat, here are our goals today. Today we want to review the fractal formation so that we can quickly and easily identify it. And we want to review again how we handle new information, which is chaos. Here's the fractal pattern. Remember from yesterday, this is the pristine fractal. And the definition for a fractal, the technical definition, is it's a series of a minimum of 5 bars where 1 bar on an up fractal is higher than the 2 preceding bars and higher than the 2 following bars. We also remember from yesterday that you can have a fractal up and a fractal down on the same 5 bars if that middle bar is an outside bar with both a higher high and a lower low than the 2 preceding bars or the 2 following bars. We also remember that the different fractals can share fingers. For example, here we have a series of 6 bars where this bar has the highest high preceded by 2 lower highs followed by 2 lower highs. This low bar is preceded by 2 higher lows and followed by 2 higher lows. So that's an up fractal, that's a down fractal. And the last consideration, and don't let this one stump you, is that anytime you have a high bar and it's followed by bars that are no higher than the high bar but equal to the high bar, that one is it just becomes invisible. So you have 5 bars that are required to make it up, and that's 2 preceding bars with lower highs, a high bar, and 2 following bars. And the 2 following lower highs do not have to be consecutive if the intermediate bar has the same high as the fractal. If this bar is higher, then that might produce another higher fractal if we had a lower high. So let's go to the next slide. And on this slide, remember that we're looking at the pattern as it develops. So let's run through this rather rapidly. And we have the up bars here. Now we have a fractal buy signal because we have a high preceded by 2 lower highs followed by 2 lower highs. And then the market moves down, remember, and it creates a lower low, and that's followed by 2 higher lows. That creates a fractal sell. And in this slide, we have a fractal sell here. We have a fractal buy here. Without putting in the alligator, what we know is that if the alligator approves, we would buy 1 tick above that. We would sell one tick below that. Later in this course, we'll find out how to put more precise stops, but at the moment, our job is to be able to recognize these fractals quickly and easily. And then we went over this formation, and this is in your book, it's in your manual, and these are just a variety of fractal formations. Here again is the pristine fractal. The pristine fractal, by the way, we call it a pristine fractal, but it's no more powerful than any other fractal. There's really no way to rate the fractal strength by the formation of the fractal. We do rate the fractal strength by where it appears in consideration with the alligator. But here's a fractal up. Here's a fractal up that has two equal highs. This one has three equal highs. This one has two highs spaced apart. This one has three highs spaced apart. So on this one, the fractal is formed when the second lower high is formed. This fractal is formed when that second lower high is formed. And just the opposite on the downside. So here's a pristine down fractal. Here's one with a double low, triple low, a double low, and spaced out triple lows. And this is a review, and all we need to know today is the actual formation of the fractal. What we would like for you to do today also is to spend some time. Actually, I would suggest that you spend 10 to 15 minutes just sitting here and meditating and thinking about what we said yesterday and last week about the most important question that you can ever ask is, how do you organize new incoming information? Do you distort it into the old categories, or do you let it organize itself? We're repeating this over and over and over because most people tend to underemphasize the importance of it, and we think it is vitally important. So let's review again the fractal facts. The fractal facts are that, first of all, what happens between an up and a down fractal is always an Elliott wave of 1 degree or another. A fractal is always a change in behavior. So when you decided, for example, to buy this course, that was a fractal. When you decide to call the broker to put in a buy or a sell, that's a fractal. When you decide to get out of a trade, that's a fractal. That's an easy to determine fractal because we all get out of a trade at that exact point where losing one more dollar is more painful than saying we were wrong to be in the trade. So a fractal is a behavioral change, whether we're talking about oxygen and hydrogen molecules, or we're talking about the market, or we're talking about romance, or whatever. A fractal is a change in behavior, and we want to trade the changing behavior of the market. And one way to trade the fractal is that whenever the market exceeds the outside extreme, which would be a high on the up fractals and a low on the down fractal, we go with the outside direction of that fractal point. So in a quick review of today, what we've done is we have looked at the fractal, and we have reviewed the fractal in its journey into phase space. Tomorrow we're going to look at the fractal on a number of different charts. We're going to locate the fractal, and we'll use the practice charts both in your manual, study manual, and in the book. So be sure you do your AT. Be sure you do your morning pages. We'll see you here tomorrow. Welcome to Day 3, Week 4. What we're going to do today is take the knowledge we've gotten in the last 2 days, and we're going to put it on charts. We're going to look at charts, and we're going to practice these charts. You can find these charts starting on page 4-8 in your manual. So let's go right away, because we know we don't even have to ask about the morning pages in the AT. Let's go right away to the charts on Week 4, Day 3. Our goal for today is to use the day in practicing locating the fractals on some various charts. So let's go right to those charts, and those charts are starting on page 4-8 in your manual. In the upper left chart, you might want to use your manual to mark these. We have this chart, and we have inside the box, what we want to do is we want you to find any fractals that are inside the box, and we'll give you a hint. There's one up fractal and there's two down fractals. Let me point out one other thing. Here is not a fractal because we have a high with two preceding lower highs, but we only have one high following that is lower. The second high is higher, so that is not a fractal. In the chart over on here inside the box, we'd like for you to find the fractals up and or down, whatever you see. And in the lower left, in this box, we would like for you to locate all the fractals. In fact, go ahead and, if you would, mark them with a pencil on your paper and mark every fractal that you see that's inside the box. And then in the lower right, these are all actual charts, mark every fractal that you see. And if you need to turn the tape off and take a few minutes to do this, do it. It's important that you do this before you look at the answer page. So see if you can figure it out yourself. Turn the tape off for a couple of minutes, and we'll be back with you with the answers. Okay, here we are back. We're back with the answers now. And this is your block inside, and there were 2 sell signals, and there were one buy signal. So we had a fractal down here, and we would have, if the alligator, if Professor Alligator would allow us, we would have gone short at this point. We would have gone long at this point. And remember, we would not go long at this point on a fractal because this is not a fractal signal. In the upper right here, in that box, we had what we illustrated, exactly what we illustrated yesterday and the day before. We have a higher high and a higher low. We have an outside bar that's preceded by 2 inside bars, followed by 2 inside bars, and that creates a fractal buy here and a fractal sell here. And notice as the chart goes on all the way over, neither of these were hit. This has the same low as this has the same low as that. So that fractal is still in effect. Now, look at this fractal. This is the same number, but that's another fractal buy here. Here's another fractal sell here that was outside the box you were marking. But this is another good example of an up fractal and a down fractal that's formed by 6 bars, and they share fingers or share the up and downs. In the lower right, we had a fractal buy here, followed by a lower fractal buy here. Now, if this, again, has been permitted by the alligator, Professor Alligator, and he's not on the chart, so we don't really know, this second fractal is lower price than the first fractal. So the one that would be valid that's hit first is the most recent. Remember, we're trading the market of what's happening now. So we would take number 2. We would not take number 1 because a lower, closer, better buy fractal is given to us. And in here, we have a number of fractals. We have a fractal up here. We have a fractal down there. We have a fractal down here. We have, that is not a fractal up there, a fractal up here, a fractal down here, fractal up, fractal down, fractal up, fractal down. And there's not a fractal up here because we don't know that there is because we don't have 2 lower lows following. Okay, let's go now to another practice page. And let's look at this practice page. And this is February and March, about 3 months. And we're going to just look at the fractals, but take a moment, turn the tape off, and mark every fractal that you see in here. Now, obviously, we're in a bull market, but mark every fractal up and down that you see, and then we'll come back and we'll look at this and we'll see what this would have done. This is, again, a little over 2 months in the coffee. So turn the tape off now, mark the fractals, and when you get them marked, come back. Okay, let's look at these. The arrows mark the fractals. And these arrows, this is a green arrow, this is the first fractal, second fractal up, third fractal up, and we're primarily, the software here is our proprietary software, and what it's marking is only the fractals that are valid. It does not mark the invalid fractals because of the alligator. Now, the alligator is down here, we're above the alligator, and we're going to integrate the alligator tomorrow. But right now, check figure 410 for the results. And what you will find is between this first fractal, in just about 2 months, just the fractals alone made over $111,000. Now, we do have some cell fractals. Here's a cell fractal, but that would be feeding the alligator. Here's one that would be feeding the alligator. Here's another one down, a third one down, another one down, another one down, and another one down. So you see you have a lot of down fractals that are not valid because of the alligator. And we want to only trade with the alligator. Now, you notice that this fractal is marked, and it's marked as a down fractal. although it really isn't on this chart. It's marked because we have truncated the chart, and the next two bars were higher lows, and you just have to take my word for it. The software does not miss the fractals. So there you have it. That's the today's practice in the fractals, and we're sort of going slow here because we want to make sure that you get the fractal down. And then tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to integrate it with the alligator. So to recap what we've done today, we've practiced locating the fractals on various charts, and tomorrow we're going to explore the fractal signals that are valid and should be actually placed in the market. So the first 3 days this week we've practiced the fractals. Tomorrow we're going to eliminate the fractals that are least likely to be profitable and to take the fractals that are going to be profitable. So do your AT, do your morning pages. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Welcome to day 4, week 4. We've spent the first 3 sessions of this week looking at the fractals by themselves, and what we're going to do today is we're going to put the alligator with them and look at a couple of charts, 3 or 4 charts. Then we suggest that after this session is over that you spend at least 30 to 45 minutes looking at various charts with the alligator and picking out and marking the fractals. So now let's go right to it. We know you've done the AT and the morning pages. Let's go to week 4, day 4 on the fractal. Our goal today, to repeat that, is to examine the fractal signal in more detail to make sure that we can recognize them easily and instantaneously, and also we want to discriminate using Professor Alligator. So let's go right to the chart. This is the chart we looked at yesterday, and this was a chart in coffee that a little over 2 months made over $111,000. And we want to extend this chart now. Notice that this one ended in mid-March. We want to go forward with that, and we want to also put the alligator in there. So let's look at trading the fractal with the alligator. Here's the alligator, the jaw, the teeth, and the lips. And notice that back here in April, this was the top that we made. We had the good run with $111,000. And then the alligator is closing his mouth here. And notice that we had a fractal down. Now this fractal down here is a legal, legitimate fractal, and we bought the low here, or excuse me, we sold the low here because this was a valid fractal since it was outside of the mouth. Now here are the rules for taking the fractal. The first entry after the alligator has been sleeping has to be a fractal. So any signals that any one of the 5 signals that happen inside the mouth or in here in the mouth are not valid. So we went short here. This was a whiplash. We were reversed, and the first buy signal was here. Now we'll tell you how we got out of this trade later in this course. There are 5 different ways of getting out of a trade, and one of them is that when the price goes back into the alligator's mouth, you just get out of that trade. So here was our first fractal up. It was hit on the 3rd day after. Actually, it was hit the 1st day after it was formed. It was hit 3 days after the high of the fractal. So we went long here. Then this was the second fractal, and let's look at that. This is the beginning fractal outside of the mouth, and you've seen this chart before. We're going to use this chart throughout because it's basically a good one and it's typical. Here's our first fractal out. Here's our second fractal out, our third fractal out, fourth fractal out, fifth fractal buy, sixth fractal buy. Now notice that you had also a fractal sell here. It was outside the mouth. Had the market come down and triggered that, then we would be short 1 tick below this fractal. But it never happened. Then we had a fractal. The next fractal down was here. We would never take that fractal because that would be feeding the alligator. That would be using the fractal or ending the fractal as it goes in the mouth. We have another fractal down here, but it's still outside the mouth, so we would never, ever take that fractal. Another fractal here, sell. But again, we would never, never take the fractal. So what we've done so far this week is we hope that you have a very good idea in your own mind of how a fractal is formed so that you can locate them immediately. Today we suggest that you spend, again, 30 to 40 minutes locating fractals on charts that are not in the book and new charts to you. we would take every one of these fractals bifractals because they're outside the mouth. This was another profitable run, not as profitable as the 2 months before, but any of these runs that are outside the mouth are going to be profitable. And hopefully you're beginning to see what a nice fellow Professor Alligator is, because he's going to teach us exactly which ones to take and which ones not to take. Now, let's look at some more fractals, and again, let's simplify it just a little bit so that we can see it without we're not going to put the alligator on here, we're just going to put the fractal bis. Now, the alligator here was below, and this is the S&P on a daily basis, and this is the one you've seen before, just over 3 months, but we want to show it to you again. We have a fractal bi here, our first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, 7, 8, 9, and although the market doesn't show it, this created a fractal here which was later taken out and bought there. Now notice that even though we don't show it, the alligator is down in here. All of this entire move is above the alligator's mouth. Here we have a fractal down, which we would not take because it's be feeding the alligator. Another fractal down, another invalid cell fractal, another fractal, another fractal, another cell fractal, another cell fractal. This is not a cell fractal here because you only have one. This bar and this bar have the same lows. Another fractal cell, and another fractal cell here. So once again, we want to be very, very discriminating in which fractals we take. We want to only trade with the trend. That's the only way that we can make money, is to get in the market the way the market is moving and let the market make the money for us. Again, let's review how powerful this is by looking at how much money you would have made had you taken these trades, only the fractal trades. Now remember, we have 5 grounded assessments, and we take every one of the grounded assessments if Professor Alligator allows us to do that. So let's look at the chart on these fractal results, and there were 9 buys, and remember that it had a little over $368,000 in a little over 3 months. So that's about $120,000 a month, and that's about $120,000 a month, and if you have 20 trading days, that's an average of about $6,000 a day. That's somewhat better than working for a living. Okay, let's review a little bit then. The fractal examples shown on this week so far were mostly buy signals. Now, sell signals work exactly the same way in a down market. So at the end of today, what we have seen is a picture of the possibilities that lay in the market when you're in tune and following the lead of the fractal trade indicator. So again, let me strongly suggest that before tomorrow, you pick out some charts, or if you have a computer that has the charts on it, go through a number of charts. If you have a computer and also on the internet, we strongly suggest that you download our proprietary software, Investor's Dream, and that will mark the fractals for you, and you can go through that one day at a time. Spend a lot of time on just the fractals, and you can program that software so it only shows the fractals, and then we'll add the other indicators as we go through. So that's about it for the end of day 4, week 4, and tomorrow we're going to review for tomorrow, but make sure again that you're practicing looking for these fractals every chance you get. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, here we are at day 5, week 4. We're 1/3 of the way through the course now. We have our foundation built, and let's spend part of today in just reviewing what we've done so far. Remember, the first week we spent most of our time understanding what the market really is. And the market's very, very simple, as you well know. It always will find that exact price where there's an equal disagreement on value and an agreement on price. It does it very quickly. It does it before even the guys on the floor know about it. What we want to do is we want to get in tune with the market. Then we spent most of the second week looking at the new science of chaos and what it has to offer us. What it has to offer us is it tells us the underlying structure of the market. And remember, it's always the underlying structure of everything. It's the underlying structure of your belief systems that allow you to trade the market the way you do trade them. And if you want to change your results in the market, you have to change your belief systems. And to change your belief systems, you have to get to that underlying structure. And it's always underlying, and it's almost always unseen. So we have to do a little bit of digging there. The big thing that we know is that once we get to that underlying structure, once we discover it, we can change it quite easily. And it has what's called a cybernetic effect. It's like the rudder on a boat. A little bit of pressure on the rudder of a boat will move a very large boat, or the ailerons on an airplane. It just takes a little bit to move gigantic masses of energy and matter. And the same thing is true with the market. The market is a cybernetic, holographic, chaos-type animal, as we are. And all animals are the same way because we are either under the influence of the torus attractor or the strange attractor. And the market is most under the influence of the strange attractor. So what we've done in our intensive study of the last almost 2 decades now of the science of chaos and applying the science of chaos to trading is we think that we have located the underlying structure of the market and the underlying structure of ourselves. Now, if we can align our own belief systems with the market, then winning becomes the path of least resistance. And trading in the market, as we said before, should be fun. If it's not fun, you're doing something wrong. It should be like a game. And in basketball, for example, you have 2 obligations. If you have the ball, you have to make an executive decision, whether you're going to dribble or shoot or pass. If you don't have the ball, then you should just relax and watch what's going on. In the market, it's the same way. If we're not in the market, we just relax and watch the alligator sleep, watch the alligator take a nap. When we see the alligator wake up, then that's somebody has passed us the ball. The alligator has passed us the ball, and we must make an executive decision, whether we're going to buy or sell or stay out or add on or double up or reverse pyramid or whatever. And we're going to talk about those executive decisions in detail in a few weeks here. We're going to speed up the process more and more as each week goes by. And what we also did 2 weeks ago in talking about the chaos is remember that the most important question in this entire course, in fact, I think it's the most important question in life, is how do you handle new information? If you distort it and massage it so it fits into your old categories, then you're limited to repeat the same actions you've done all your life. But if you relax those old categories and those old belief systems and allow this new incoming information to organize itself, then you become in tune with the universe, and you become in tune with the market. And trading becomes a very nice way to earn a good living. Then we spent last week on the alligator. Now the alligator, remember, is 3 different balance lines coming from 3 different time frames. You have the jaw, which is the time frame that the chart is on. You have the teeth, which is a significantly lower time frame. And you have the lips, which is still a second significantly lower time frame. So what you're seeing is a personification of 3 different time frames on one market. And when the alligator, and we think the alligator is really alive, when the alligator is moving and hunting, you want to be in the same direction as the alligator. And the alligator is going to tell us which signals to take, which ones not to take, and it's also going to tell us when to take profits in the market so that we can take profits at the most advantageous place. Then this week we've spent on our first breakout signal, and that's a fractal signal. And in chaos terms, we're talking about phase space from physics. And the breakout signal is the first signal you always take. You don't take any signal until you get that first fractal that's outside the mouth. And in the fractal, we'll talk about this later, but we sometimes take it with the teeth. So we'll explain this next week when we talk about the AO and the AC. And next week, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to spend an entire week talking about the momentum. Remember the illustration of the bowling ball going down the street. It's the momentum that keeps the market going. It's new information that moves the market, but we want to trade momentum simply because momentum will always change before the price does. And next week, Justine's going to give you several illustrations of the momentum warning us sometimes days, sometimes a week, week and a half ahead of a price move that the price move is coming. So it's like reading tomorrow's Wall Street Journal. So a quick review. So far in these 4 weeks, we've talked about the market, we've talked about the science of chaos, we've examined the alligator as our odds maker and as our asset allocator, and we've also looked at our first trade in any campaign, which is the fractal. Now we're coming to the fourth weekend. And what we suggest strongly that you do on this fourth weekend is to have a very special date with yourself. You've been in this program for 4 weeks now. If possible, have an all-day date with yourself. Or go someplace and spend overnight. Do something special for yourself. Do something that you would not ordinarily do. Reward yourself. One of the things we know that's very important in trading is to reward yourself for good behavior and good trading. What we do here with the Profittunity Trading Group is every member of the Profittunity Trading Groups, we give ourselves a date with our IT once a week. We get a massage every week. This is our reward for being here. We also have a date every weekend. And remember that you don't take anyone on your date. It's you, and you do something unusual, something you haven't done before. Another suggestion I'd like to make, and this is in your manual, is that you note down any synchronicity that's appearing in your life, things that just sort of happen to work out, coincidences. And if you allow the new incoming information to organize itself, what you're going to find is you're going to be having coincidences in your life every day. And these are going to be very meaningful. And you're going to reach the point of knowing without knowing how you know. And you're going to reach the point in trading that it's an effortless effort. So let me congratulate you for reaching the 1/3 mark. And let me, if I can, stimulate you to look forward, because the best is yet to come. Have a good weekend. We'll see you here next week for week number 5.